All right, guys. So we're going to have some fun today with making a really nice, healthy spring, summer type dish. A lot of really cool ingredients here that are very easy to obviously come by, but also very much healthy. It's actually a dish that's taken from Provence in France. And I love Provençal sauce. It just has like that great acidity that you're looking for, fresh herbs. You've got capers, you've got olives, garlic and onions, and you can be even more creative and you can add peppers, you could add zucchini and yellow squash as your garden starts to, get really crazy, hopefully during the summertime. So what we're going to show you today, again, you can go out and do some of the things that we've done. We've taken beautiful vine-ripened tomatoes and some plum tomatoes, and we've taken the skins off. I like to do that just because it's kind of a refined look at the end and actually texture. Some people don't really care for the skin as much on a tomato, especially on a cooked tomato. So how do you do that? It's very simple. Pot of boiling water, maybe just a tad of salt. You take the tomato and you just take off the first part right here where the stem is, and then you just make a little cross hatch on this as well. And I'll certainly do a video on this as well, just to show you in more detail how to do it. And then it's just basically you drop it into the water. It comes out in literally, seconds, depending on how ripe the tomato is. And when it comes out, it's actually going to be this perfect. The skin will actually just peel right off. So that just lends itself. And then you can chop it up. And you can actually take the seeds out if you want to get really refined. I like the seeds in it myself. I just think it's got flavor. Or you can go out and do what a lot of people do is just, let's be convenient and buy a nice can of diced tomatoes or crushed tomatoes. I like diced tomatoes. Again, I'm looking for that texture. Then we use, and again, if you like olives, certainly you can use whatever olive you like. I mean, we've used a Taggiasca olive. You can certainly use a Kalamata. You could use a green olive, a black olive. It depends on what you like. Okay, so you don't have to go out and buy anything that's actually special. You read a lot of recipes; they'll tell you you have to get that particular recipe or that particular ingredient. And the answer to that is really that's not true. I mean, cooking is supposed to be about fun and what you feel and what you like to do. So and what you like to eat. So you can use the base model of what you're trying to do, but don't have to follow it to a T. We also have some beautiful capers, and for the finished dish, we're also going to use some caper berries, which just again is just a little bit of a different visual at the very end of the dish. So we're going to get started first on making the sauce, the Provençal sauce. And as soon as that gets going, we're going to start working on, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the fish. Okay, we're going to do a beautiful piece of wild salmon today. Again, very healthy. We're going to start off with some olive oil. You don't want the pan to be way too hot. Just, good temperature to get started. We're going to start off with some diced onions. And you should hear them the minute you go into the pan. We're not looking to get any color on these onions. We just want it to actually sweat. Okay, not a lot of color. We're also going to use an ingredient you're always going to use in most cooking is onions and garlic at the base of any great sauce. So adding in the garlic. And we're just going to cook this and turn it down just a little bit so it doesn't get too hot. And again, this is a quick sauce, so you can certainly make it if you've got friends coming over, make it in the afternoon or the morning. You can make it the day before. It's certainly not going to be a sauce. It's going to be an issue. It holds up so well, okay? So you can certainly make it a day before or the day of and just leave it, ready to go when you need it. It can also be made and frozen in smaller containers, another great way to do it also. So we're going to go ahead and use the diced tomatoes, okay? And I'm going to turn this back up a little bit. And you can certainly, if you like, especially in the summertime, you've got some of those beautiful fresh tomatoes coming out of your garden. It can be cherry tomatoes, it can be any type of tomato that you have growing. And again, for us here in the Northeast, we've always got some beautiful basil working as well. And it just seems this is a great dish and again, so easy to make and so healthy. And we're going to get this cranking right now. Just get a cooking a little bit more. And now we're going to go ahead and we're going to start on our fish. So, you know, we'll let this go for a little bit. And you can certainly add some stock if you feel like you want to. Certainly, I might not need to because I'm going to add the juice as well with the capers. So that should give me what I need. And we're just going to finish it off with some beautiful fresh parsley and some beautiful basil. Okay, this is going nicely now. So right now we're going to add a little salt. And we're going to do a little pepper. And again, when you're cooking, always use a pepper mill. It just gives a better flavor. You know, you can buy, toast the peppers off if you'd like. Put them in your pepper mill. Adding some pepper flakes here for a little bit of heat. You don't have to use that if you don't like too much spice. You can always cut back on that. So with this, next move we're going to make is for the salmon. So when you buy the salmon in the store, what are your things you're going to look for? Okay, first of all, you're going to make sure on this side there's no scales because you don't want scales on the fish if you like the skin. Certainly you can have them take the actual skin off if you'd like. The other thing you're looking for is to make sure that there's no pin bones. Okay, pin bones are those long bones that run right down the actual entire fish on both sides. So you just want to make sure you feel to make sure there's nothing in there. And that, you know, you'll definitely feel that pin bone. So you want to make sure that's not there. Nothing's there. I can see that and I can feel it. So what's next is I want to pat it dry because I'm going to be adding this to a pan to sear it. And I want the skin to be nice and crispy. So again, just pat it dry. And one step that I tell people to make also is to take your knife and the back of your knife, turn it upside down, and just kind of rub it like this onto the skin. And I'll show you in a second what that does. Two things it'll do. It'll take some excess moisture, which is really what this step is all about. But also, if there's any extra, you know, a scale like that one right there that just was sticking on there, we're going to take that. Because you want all this moisture, it's important to get that moisture off. Because if that moisture stays on the skin, the first thing that's going to happen is when you start to cook it, the fish is going to jump right off the pan. And that's a pretty drastic description, but that's kind of what happens. It just tends to move. So what we're going to do now is next step is to season it with a little salt. And I'm not going to add pepper to this step at this point. I'm just going to go ahead and sear it, and we're going to add pepper to it in a little bit. We're going to add a little bit of oil. And you can use olive oil. You know, you can use grapeseed oil, you can use coconut oil, or you can use canola oil. So I'm going to turn this pan up just a little bit more. And now when I put it in to this pan just now, I want to make sure I'm holding it down. Now you don't have to use your hand. You can certainly take your spatula and you're just going to press it down. You're not going to press it really hard. You don't want to go crazy. But you definitely got to make it where the skin actually feels like it's going to stick to the pan. Obviously, I'm using a non-stick pan, so that's not going to happen, but I can feel that this is definitely, you want all parts of the skin touching the actual sauté pan. This way you get a nice, even sear. Perfect. All right, so our fish is working nicely. Our sauce is going nicely as well. So what we're going to do now is we're going to add the olives to this sauce. And again, as I mentioned, any olive you like, that's what you add. Add the capers. And I like to add the juice from the capers as well. I mean, you can certainly use cornichons too. Some people love cornichons, and that's what they like to use. So if you want to use cornichons, go ahead and do that. And sometimes, if you're making this sauce, for example, and you love it so much that you're like, you know what, I'm not just going to make this in the summer or the spring when, you know, tomatoes are starting to come in season, right? You can also say to yourself, well, I'm actually going to use these tomatoes, like canned tomatoes, and sometimes you'll get the ones in the store and look for the ones that are actually natural, but they also have a little sweetness to it. But if they don't, you can certainly add a little bit of sugar to this. If you taste it, it tastes very acidic. I mean, cooking is all about balance. So it's about balancing from, you know, sweet and sour and all those things, right? So if you find that your sauce is definitely, you know, in that it's got that very, very bitter taste at the end. Just by simply adding a little touch of sugar, it just balances it right off, and that's a way to do it. So next thing we're going to do now is we're going to add a little bit of pepper to this. And what I like to do with the salmon is cook it pretty much 98% of the way just with the skin down. And then what I do at the very end is I want to just turn it over, because I like to cook the salmon at mid-rare. Certainly if you want to go medium, that's perfectly fine. You're just going to cook it a little bit longer. If you like it more well, I mean, that's certainly fine as well. Cook it the way you like to cook it. But certainly make sure you know where your fish is from. You don't want to be buying fish and cooking it medium rare if it's from a farmed salmon or something like that. Wild salmon definitely is something you want to be looking at for that. Again, we have this, we're going to add the herbs at the very end to our actual sauce. Fish, we're going to take it again, like I said, to 98, 99% of the way just with the skin down, and just leaving the fish do its thing, right? And everything else is fine. At the very end, we're going to add some butter, a little bit of garlic smashed, and a little bit of fresh thyme, and then we're going to baste it, and then we're going to plate it. All right, guys, so next thing we're going to do now is we're just going to go ahead and we got some washed flat leaf parsley. Okay, we've got some beautiful basil, and we're going to use a very fancy term, which means very, very thinly sliced basil, and that's chiffonade. I don't really like to chop, go at basil like this or do this because it tends to bruise it. So by doing it like this, where you roll it and you just go ahead and rock your knife, and you've heard me talk about knife skills. I mean, just definitely using this part of your finger just to make sure that you keep your fingers. And again, just go slow. You don't need to go crazy, You get nice little slivers like this. And that's what chiffonade basil looks like. Parsley doesn't get the same loving, so to speak. It gets to be chopped as is, nice and rough. And then a lot of people, they'll say, well, chef, do you take the stems off? And you don't want too much of the stem on any herb except for cilantro. Cilantro, believe it or not, has most of the flavor from cilantro is actually in the actual stem. So if you're making a cilantro pesto or something like that, or anything to do like a chimichurri and you're doing having some fun with it, leave the stems on and just use your NutriBullet to get it really, really pureed nicely. We have some beautiful roasted garlic oil that we did earlier. So we're going to add a little bit of this into the sauce. We're not putting butter into this sauce. We're going to put butter into the fish as we finish it off. So we've got, right now, we're going to go ahead and add in the parsley into the sauce. And you can see how quick that sauce was. You don't need to cook it for a long period of time. I'm going to wait until the very last second before I add my basil. So now this fish, we're going to turn it. Next step is going to be adding some butter. We're going to do a little bit of fresh thyme. You hear that sound, that little crackling sound? That's exactly what you want to hear. We're going to take our garlic. And if you don't feel comfortable doing this with a knife, because I've seen people try to do that, it's not always a good scene. So don't do that. Take something else that's not as sharp, right? Adding in your garlic. I'm turning this pan off now. This fish is done. So all I'm going to do now is baste it. This is always my favorite part. When and you're in a restaurant and you get this little piece at the end and you're so proud of this fact that this dish is going to be beautiful, that shine that you get from the butter and the smell of the garlic and the fresh herbs, I'm always going to love that. Now, next thing to do, because you're all done here, you're just going to take your fish, move it over here, just have it sit here for a second. I'm going to give it the same thing, all of this beautiful flavor it had. I'm just going to put it back in there, just for now, and then just a little bit of the butter. Now, we're done. This is it. The sauce, fully completed, adding in my basil. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to add a little squeeze of lemon onto the fish. Makes it beautiful. Make sure we're going to plate up this. I always tell my guys, you know, never catch your plate with your thumb down. You always want to catch it at the rim. You don't want the customer or the people, your guests, seeing your thumbprints after all this beautiful work you've done. So, and you can see there's not a lot of juice to this sauce. You can certainly add more, but we're going to finish it off with a little bit of oil. It's a beautiful looking plate right now. We're just going to add a little bit of olive oil. That goes on like this. And I mentioned earlier about these caper berries we got. So we're just going to take a few caper berries because they look really cool and you can actually get them out of the jar. We're just going to take these, add a couple onto the plate. And then we're going to take our fish. And there it is. There's a beautiful, healthy Provençal sauce with a beautiful wild Atlantic salmon. And what you can do at the very, very end, if you'd like, is just finish it with a little bit of salt. And we have these beautiful garlic flowers that we have. So we're just going to put a few of those on top. And there it is.